The last light. The driver's eyes darted nervously from the rearview mirror to the empty streets ahead as the rickety bus jostled through the desolate city. He was already behind schedule, and the ravenous hunger of the waiting crowd behind him was palpable. The vehicle was packed with weary passengers, all desperate to make it back to their homes before nightfall. The sun was setting rapidly, casting a deep red glow across the wasteland that had once been a thriving metropolis. But just as the light began to fade, a bone-chilling sound pierced the air. It was the final siren, warning of the impending curfew. Panic set in among the passengers. They knew all too well what happened to those who dared to wander the streets after dark. The howls of the infected echoed in their minds, filling them with dread. My heart racing, I looked out the window and saw the hordes of shambling creatures emerging from the shadows, their eyes aglow with hunger. The bus was my only refuge, but it was moving too slowly. I had to make a split-second decision. I glanced at the driver, his face a mask of fear. The engine roared as if sensing the danger ahead. I knew what I had to do. I gritted my teeth and launched myself from my seat, diving toward the doors. The other passengers looked at me in shock, but I didn't care. I had to get home, no matter the cost. With only 5 seconds to decide, I pushed my way past the throngs of people and leaped from the bus, my feet pounding the pavement as I raced toward my house 5 miles away. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran, my breath ragged and labored. The shadows around me seemed to writhe with danger, threatening to swallow me whole. But I kept moving, fueled by the sheer force of my determination. I didn't know if I would make it. I didn't know if I would survive the night. But I refused to give up. With every step, I drew closer to the safety of my home, praying that I would reach it before I became prey to the monsters lurking in the darkness. By sheer grace, I reached home. The entrance was locked, at least it appeared so. That is seemingly normal, but in this case, it's odd. Straight ahead, I approached it, and just as I had anticipated, it was locked. I grabbed the rifle from the garage and gave it 2 quick bangs, and it instantly opened. I heard some screaming inside before I moved to enter. Impulses of intense cold waves ran up my spine. I felt terrified instantly. I wasn't prepared to understand what had transpired. As I burst through the door, the darkness inside was nearly suffocating, and I struggled to see anything beyond a few feet in front of me. The screaming had stopped, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. A strange odor wafted through the air, sharp and metallic, filling my nostrils with the acrid scent of fear. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized that something was terribly wrong. My rifle at the ready, I moved cautiously through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing through the stillness. But as I crept through the living room, my breath caught in my throat. The floor was slick with blood, the walls splattered with gore. Something terrible had happened here, something beyond my imagining. As I turned the corner, I saw her. My wife lay crumpled on the floor, her eyes staring lifelessly up at the ceiling. A scream of rage and despair welled up in my throat, but I fought it down, determined to discover what had befallen her. I moved through the house, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking with rage and fear. And then, in the bedroom, I found the source of the screams. It was a mysterious child, no more than 5 or 6, cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. I lowered my rifle, my voice softening as I tried to calm her. But then she turned to me, and I saw her face for the first time. It was twisted and contorted, the eyes black and lifeless. It lunged at me, the tiny hands reaching for my throat. I barely managed to dodge its grasp, stumbling back in horror. My mind reeled with the implications of what I had just witnessed. This was no ordinary sickness, no mere virus or plague. It was something far more insidious, far more terrifying. And I knew in that moment that if I was going to survive in this new world, I would have to be ready to face anything, no matter how unspeakable or monstrous. I raised my rifle, the cold metal heavy in my hands as the child continued to lunge at me, their twisted features contorted with rage. I did not want to do it, but I knew that I had no choice. I took aim, my finger tight on the trigger, and fired. I shot the little girl right in the head. The gunshot echoed through the house, shattering the eerie silence that had filled the air. The child fell to the ground, their body twitching and jerking in the throes of death. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving with exertion and fear, as the reality of what I had just done sunk in. This was a new world, a dangerous world, and I had just killed a child. God knows where she came from. But as I looked at her twisted, monstrous features, I knew that there was no going back. I turned to my wife, lying on the floor, and my heart leapt with relief as I saw that she was still breathing. I rushed to her side, my fingers trembling as I checked for a pulse. She was alive, but barely. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. I knew that I had to act quickly if I was going to save her. I moved into action, bandaging her wounds, giving her water and medicine, doing everything I could to help her survive. I stayed by her side through the night, my eyes scanning the darkness beyond the window as I kept watch for any sign of danger. As the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, I knew that I had made it through the night. But I also knew that this was only the beginning. The world was still a dangerous place, full of unknown terrors and horrors. But as I looked down at my wife, still alive despite the odds, I felt a sense of hope. Perhaps in this dark and desolate world, there was still a glimmer of light, a flicker of humanity that could guide us through the darkness.